From solo adventurers conquering treacherous trails to seasoned rangers and daring photographers chasing the thrill, what drives people to risk everything in Russia's unforgiving wilderness? These 6 stories reveal the allure and the peril of landscapes where even the slightest mistake can be fatal. How far would you go to test your limits? Through harrowing encounters and life-or-death decisions, these accounts expose the razor-thin line between human bravery and nature's wrath. Join us as we explore survival at its most extreme and the steep price of venturing into Russia's wildest frontiers. On September 14, 2023, in the remote wilderness of the Russian Altai Mountains, Lena Ivanova and her friends ventured out on an early fall hike, eager to see the stunning alpine views before the first snowfalls made the trails unwalkable. The chill in the air only heightened the sense of adventure, the crispness of the forest seeming to amplify every sound, every rustling leaf. They were all amateur adventurers, no one more enthusiastic than Lena. At only 20, she had developed a reputation among her friends and online followers as a thrill seeker, always chasing the next adrenaline rush and the perfect photo to capture it. Lena had recently started documenting her adventures online, drawing attention with her daring excursions, each one riskier than the last. Having so many people like and comment on her posts encouraged the girl always to take things a step further. She loved the attention and the idea of becoming a well-known adventurer, but her hunger for recognition sometimes pushed her to ignore potential dangers. This hike was just another attempt to find that perfect shot, something to set her apart, something thrilling enough to capture the imaginations of her growing online audience. As they climbed up the trail, Lena spotted something near a scenic overlook, a massive Russian grizzly bear, also known as the black grizzly bear, lumbering along the edge of the tree line. The sight of the bear, framed by a backdrop of mountain peaks and valleys, was majestic, powerful, and everything Lena could have hoped for. She saw the perfect opportunity to grab the kind of shot that would draw in hundreds, maybe thousands, of likes and comments. Her friends, sensing her intentions, exchanged worried glances. They murmured warnings, but Lena was already moving, edging her way toward the overlook. She ignored them, caught up in her excitement, and dismissed the uneasy feeling at the back of her mind. The young woman positioned her camera, slowly moving forward, steadying her phone. Only one thing was on her mind. She wanted to get a selfie with the majestic creature. Her heart beat faster, not out of fear, but excitement. She crept closer, confident that she'd remain undetected if she stayed quiet. She snapped a few selfies from afar, but the pictures were dark. Lena moved closer to the animal and used her frontal camera flash. She smiled at the camera and took the selfie. But just as the camera flashed, the bear's head shot up, its small dark eyes fixed directly on Lena. Its entire body tensed instantly, muscles coiling as it locked its gaze on the intruder. For a moment, neither moved. Lena froze, her breath caught in her throat, eyes wide with dawning fear. Then, in a sudden, terrifying burst, the bear released a deep growl and charged. Its massive body moved with surprising speed, a brown blur closing the distance between them faster than Lena could process. Lena's instincts kicked in. She turned to run, her heartbeat thundering as panic filled her veins. But in her desperate sprint, her foot caught on a hidden root jutting from the ground. She stumbled, arms flailing, her balance lost. Time seemed to slow as she fell, her vision a dizzying swirl of earth and sky. She hit the ground hard, her palms scraping against the rocky soil as she tried to steady herself, but it was too late. The bear was on her. The massive animal loomed over her, a shadow of brute force and raw power. In the brief second before it struck, Lena felt a cold wave of terror like she'd never known. Her dreams of adventure, of capturing the ultimate photo, evaporated in the face of this primal force. Every instinct screamed for her to move, to crawl, to get away, but her body was frozen in fear. The first blow hit her with staggering force, the bear's claws raking across her back, tearing through her jacket and slicing her skin. She screamed, the sound swallowed by the vast, indifferent wilderness around them. Pain consumed her, sharp and unrelenting, every nerve in her body alight as she struggled beneath the bear's weight. Its claws cut deep, tearing muscle and tissue, and every time she moved, fresh agony flared. She could hear its ragged breathing and smell the musky scent of fur and earth. Panic overwhelmed her, her mind spiraling as she fought to comprehend what was happening. Her friend stood a few yards away, paralyzed by the horror. The shock rendered them helpless, each caught between the impulse to run and the urge to intervene somehow, though they knew they could do nothing. They could only watch, frozen in fear, as the bear's immense jaws came down again, each bite punctuating the brutal reality that no camera lens could capture, that no story could ever fully convey. The forest seemed to close in, the sounds of struggle echoing into the wilderness before fading into silence. And then, it was over almost as fast as it had started. As if content with its deed and no longer angered, the bear backed off and lumbered into the forest, disappearing into the thick cover of trees. Finally finding the courage to move, Lena's friends rushed to her side, their hands trembling as they fumbled for any sign of life. But there was none to be found. 20-year-old Lena Ivanova lost her life. A chill settled over her friends as they looked down at the remnants of the lively, fearless young woman they had known, who had always seemed invincible. Her camera lay nearby, miraculously undamaged, its lens pointed skyward, capturing nothing but the silent canopy above. As emergency crews arrived hours later, alerted by a faint, desperate call for help from one of Lena's friends, they found the camera near her side. It was a haunting reminder of her last moments, a moment meant for recognition, for adventure, transformed into a warning of nature's unforgiving power. The story quickly spread, becoming a sobering headline and a harsh lesson to those who read it. In the aftermath, Lena's friends could barely speak of the incident. The horror of what they had seen, the futility they had felt, would haunt them for the rest of their lives. It was early October 2011 when a team of 4 seasoned Russian hikers embarked on an expedition that would test even the most prepared adventurers in the remote mountain ranges of Siberia. Led by Misha, a former rescue operative, they aimed to map new routes and practice survival skills, eager to immerse themselves in the unforgiving landscape. Misha's presence alone inspired confidence. With years of experience in high-stakes rescues, he was no stranger to life-threatening situations. Known for his ability to assess danger and act quickly, he had saved lives in harsh conditions, braving blizzards, avalanches, and encounters with predators. Misha's skills were invaluable in these wild terrains, and his leadership reassured the group as they traversed the rugged, unfamiliar paths. Their expedition had taken them deep into untouched wilderness, where the air was thin and the cold bit through every layer of clothing. Steep slopes and dense forests lined their path, offering breathtaking views, but hiding countless dangers. They first spotted it on one of these narrow, snow-dusted trails, a small bear cub limping across a patch of open ground. The cub's movements were awkward, its left hind leg dragging slightly, a clear sign of injury. It huddled against the base of a tree, vulnerable and alone, its tiny form a stark contrast to the vast and threatening wilderness around it. The hikers stopped, eyes fixed on the cub. Encountering a lone bear cub in these regions was rare. All 4 knew its implied risk. They gathered close, some whispering concerns and a few casting uneasy glances into the surrounding woods. It was only a matter of time before the mother bear returned, likely agitated by her cub's distress. But leaving the cub seemed just as wrong. Its injury was severe, the limp unmistakable, As they debated what to do, Misha's face remained focused, as did his years of experience calculating the dangers and possible outcomes. But even the best-trained instincts couldn't prepare them for what came next. With barely a rustle to warn them, a massive brown bear burst from the trees, her dark eyes blazing with rage and fear. She moved faster than they could react, her powerful body hurtling toward them, blending muscle, fury, and raw maternal instinct. Misha instantly recognized the danger, his body tensing as he stepped in front of the others, his arm raised to draw her focus away. His stance was firm, his face determined, but each could see the realization in his eyes. They were in the mother bear's territory, and there would be no negotiation. The bear charged, closing the gap with terrifying speed. Misha shouted, waving his arms to keep her focus on him as he moved backward, attempting to buy the others a few seconds. The bear lunged at Misha. It struck him with brutal force. A second later, Misha found himself sprawled on the ground. Blood dripped from the fresh gashes on his shoulder. Misha's body shook as he struggled back to his feet, his breaths labored, his eyes trained on the bear. His stance was a clear message to his friends. Run. He was buying them time, and they had only moments to escape. With a collective, reluctant step, they turned and began to flee. Their feet pounded against the frozen earth as they made their way back down the trail, their hearts beating fast as they listened to Misha's struggle echoing behind them. Misha continued to fend off the bear, using every ounce of strength and skill he had acquired over years of survival training. His breaths came raggedly, each a painful effort as he faced the creature in a final, desperate stand. The bear attacked again, her jaws snapping, her claws tearing through the air. Misha raised an arm to shield himself, but the bear's teeth sank into his shoulder, her powerful jaws clamping down with a force that cut through skin and bone. He gasped, the shock and pain radiating through his body. Still, he fought against the bear with everything he had, his mind only on his friends and the seconds he could give them to escape. The pain was unimaginable as the bear released him and swung a paw across his side. He fell to his knees, his vision blurred, the icy ground cold beneath him. He could feel his strength fading, but his body moved almost instinctively, his hands raising again in defiance. Each strike from the bear left him weaker, but he held his ground, standing as a barrier between the beast and his fleeing friends. Then, with one final devastating blow, the bear's paw struck his head, and he fell motionless to the ground. The attack subsided as the bear assessed her surroundings, her senses confirming the absence of other threats. She sniffed the air, nuzzling her injured cub before retreating into the forest, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared, leaving only silence and a scene marked by tragedy. Hours later, a search party returned to the area. They found Misha's body where he had fallen, the ground around him stained with evidence of his final battle. His features were peaceful in the cold, his expression calmed in a way that belied the horror of his final moments. Nearby, his friends gathered, some clutching their arms, their faces pale and solemn. They were alive, thanks to him, and the reality weighed heavily on them. Misha's story spread in the following days, becoming more than just a tragedy, but a tale of courage and selflessness. He had paid the ultimate price, a reminder of the delicate line that separated human compassion from the brutal reality of the wild. The world moved on, but those who knew him could never forget, each recounting his final stand as a testament to the strength he embodied, even in the face of certain death. In the vast wilderness of the Russian Far East, Yuri's final day as a ranger dawned under a cold, clear sky. The earthy scent of the forest that Yuri had come to love over 3 decades of patrolling filled his nose, and he felt excited and meditative. This wasn't an ordinary day. It was his last patrol before retirement, a farewell to the trails he knew better than anyone. At 62, Yuri had spent most of his life safeguarding these remote woods, protecting the land and its creatures from poachers, campers, and the creeping spread of civilization. He'd grown used to the solitude, the chill of dawn, and the endless call of nature. His colleagues often joked that he was more bear than man, and he liked that idea. But recent reports of poaching activity had come in over the radio that morning, an unwelcome reminder of one of the reasons he was ready to leave the job behind. The struggle against poaching was endless, an uphill battle against those who saw the forest as nothing more than a hunting ground for profit. Yuri was used to confronting these intruders, but his age had tempered his approach. Now, he preferred to track and monitor. His skills at reading the land were legendary, and he moved through the dense forest, noticing every broken twig and disturbed patch of dirt. His heart was heavy but at peace, knowing he had done his part to protect this wild place. But as he moved through a familiar trail near the base of a mountain, Yuri saw the forest was tense. Birds stopped their singing, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. He knew the signs of danger. It was a silent warning that all was not as it should be. Following his instincts, he cautiously scanned the ground for signs of recent human activity. Instead, he found something more concerning. Deep and wide, fresh bear tracks leading through a muddy patch just off the trail. And then he noticed them. Human tracks, faint but unmistakable. The bear had recently crossed paths with people, and by the looks of it, something had left it on edge. As Yuri moved closer to the source of the tracks, his heart rate quickened. He knew enough about bears to understand that such close encounters often left the animals unpredictable and dangerously aggressive. Taking a few slow steps, he gripped his bear spray, ready in case of a sudden encounter. But as he stepped through a gap in the trees, his worst fears were realized. The bear stood there, towering in a small clearing, its fur bristling and eyes wild. It was enormous, far larger than any bear Yuri had seen in recent years, its massive bulk a testament to the wilderness's harsh demands. Yuri's breath caught as he saw the tension in its posture, the way it locked its gaze on him. The animal's rage and fear seemed palpable, a storm ready to unleash. There was no way for Yuri to tell this bear he meant no harm. The man only hoped the animal would decide he was not worth it. Still, Yuri knew he had to be ready for whatever would come his way. With a sharp breath, Yuri prepared to use the bear spray, raising it quickly in his hand. But the bear moved faster than he had anticipated, lunging forward with a deep, guttural roar that shook him. He tried to pull the trigger, his hand steady despite the pounding of his heart, but the bear was already upon him. The first blow struck his shoulder, a bone-shattering force that sent him staggering back. He screamed in pain, clutching the bloody mess that was on his shoulder. Yuri stumbled, falling to his knees as the bear towered above him. The animal was so large its form blocked out the light. With one last effort, Yuri raised the bear spray, releasing a short burst into the animal's face. But it was too little, too late. The bear, its senses dulled but far from subdued, retaliated with another powerful swipe, sending Yuri sprawling onto his back. Then, its jaws closed down on Yuri's leg, the crushing pressure sending a fresh wave of agony through him. Blood soaked the man's clothes, staining the forest floor as he fought to breathe, every instinct pushing him to resist, to survive. He fumbled for his radio, pressing the button with trembling fingers as he choked out a call for help. His voice cracked with pain, but he managed to give his location, his tone steady even in the face of death. The forest absorbed the sounds of his struggle, his words swallowed by the indifferent silence of the wilderness. With each passing second, his strength faded, yet he clung to the knowledge that he was doing what he loved and was part of something greater than himself. His work had been his life, and even now, as the bear's assault continued, there was a strange peace in knowing he had given everything to the land he cherished. The bear released him and left, its anger spent. The silence returned, broken only by the faint crackle of the radio and the sound of Yuri's labored breathing. His world grew dim, the forest fading around him as he lay there, still and silent, his body battered and broken, but his spirit at peace. A search team arrived hours later, drawn by his final call and the distant, haunting silence that filled the woods. They found him lying motionless, his radio clutched in his hand, his expression calm despite the ferocity of the encounter. His death made national news, reaching every corner of the country. Yuri's story sparked outrage, drawing attention to the dangers faced by rangers who patrolled remote areas with limited support. Many mourned his loss, but those who knew him took solace in the fact that Yuri had died in the place he loved most, surrounded by the wilderness he had spent his life defending. With their exams now over, a group of college friends from Moscow set out for a weekend adventure in the Russian wilderness. Exchanging endless hours of studying for the promise of a campfire under the stars was a nice change of pace. They were young, carefree, and more importantly, eager, ready for a well-deserved break. Hiking to an isolated spot deep within the forest, they'd heard whispers about recent bear sightings, but brushed them off as rumors meant to scare off urban dwellers like themselves. After all, they were just out for a few days of fun and adventure. What harm could come from a little time in nature? The group of 5 was tight-knit, bound together by late-night study sessions and shared laughter. Vlad, the jokester and trickster of the group, had orchestrated much of the trip. Always one for pranks and daring, Vlad was the type to take challenges head-on, his antics as unpredictable as they were funny. His friends counted on him to lighten any situation, knowing Vlad would add excitement to their weekend in the wild. Yet, for all his bravado, Vlad hadn't spent much time in the wilderness. His lack of experience and his playful nature made him a little reckless, a fact they shrugged off as just part of his charm. They reached their campsite late afternoon, exhausted and ready to unwind. After setting up tents and gathering wood for a fire, they unpacked their food, eager to start their evening of campfire stories and stargazing. Vlad joked about the bears, making clawing gestures and roaring as he tramped around, pretending to be a bear to spook his friends. They all laughed and tossed their food carelessly into their packs, leaving snacks and wrappers scattered around the campsite. No one bothered to hang or secure their provisions, a mistake they would regret. As night fell, the forest grew quiet, and the sounds of the wilderness surrounded them. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow over their faces as they swapped tales of urban legends and spooky encounters, daring one another to wander off into the dark. Vlad volunteered, pretending to scout the area and disappearing briefly into the trees before returning with a smirk. They continued like this, lost in their laughter and stories, oblivious to the danger looming nearby. In the early hours, as the fire burned low and their laughter turned to sleepy murmurs, the forest's quiet was shattered by a heavy rustling. A large, dark shadow moved at the edge of the campsite, drawn by the scent of their discarded food. The bear was massive, a full-grown bear, its broad shoulders and muscled frame imposing as it edged closer, sniffing the air. None of the friends noticed it until a loud crack, a branch breaking under the bear's weight, echoed through the campsite, jolting them awake. Panic gripped the group as the firelight flickered, casting eerie shadows. They scrambled to their feet, barely processing the sight of the bear as it stepped into the open, its eyes glinting in the firelight. The scent of food had lured it close, and now it was faced with terrified, retreating figures. In the chaos, they scattered, stumbling over each other and darting in every direction as they tried to escape. Vlad, uncharacteristically stunned by the sudden turn of events, froze for a split second before darting toward the trees, away from the others. His heart pounded, a deep, primal fear tightening his chest as he heard the bear's heavy steps close behind him. In his haste, Vlad stumbled for a split second. The bear was already upon him when he regained his footing. The animal let out a terrifying roar, its size dwarfing the college kid, who now wished he wouldn't have suggested this cursed trip. Vlad's mind raced, realizing his situation and hitting him with brutal clarity. And then, in an instant, the bear's claws made contact with his skin, leaving deep gashes behind. Vlad collapsed to the ground, gasping in shock. For a second, he dared to hope he was having a nightmare. But the pain was real, and so was the bear. The animal's powerful jaws snapped as it assessed the motionless figure below. Vlad struggled to breathe, his body aching with every shallow inhalation. He tried to crawl, but the bear's massive weight pinned him in place, and he could only watch in horror as it lowered its head, baring teeth that glinted ominously. The pain was overwhelming, his senses dulling as he grappled with the sheer force of the animal's grip. The others watched helplessly from a distance, paralyzed by the scene unfolding before them. They had scattered too far to help, and none dared approach as the bear turned its attention back to Vlad, its mouth opening in a final terrifying snarl. In those final moments, they knew Vlad's fate was sealed. The bear's instincts were triggered by fear and hunger, and it would not relent until it felt safe again. As dawn broke, the forest was silent, the previous night's horror settling into an eerie calm. It wasn't until rescuers arrived hours later, summoned by a friend who'd managed to reach a signal, that the full tragedy of the night was revealed. Vlad's friends, shaken and pale, recounted the night in broken voices, the weight of their loss and guilt pressing heavily on their hearts. His absence left a gaping hole in their group. The once lively, mischievous friend, who had filled their days with laughter, was now just a memory. After the incident, officials reminded the public of the importance of securing food and respecting the boundaries of the wilderness. Vlad's story became a cautionary tale. His friends mourned the loss, haunted by his laughter, forever etched in their memories, mingling with the echo of a bear's roar in the darkness. They would never forget that night, wondering whether they could have saved Vlad. Renowned wildlife photographer Mikhail Pavlov crouched in a dense thicket in Russia's Far East, his lens trained on a family of bears feeding by the riverbank. It was August 12th, 2017, and Mikhail had been waiting for hours, silently observing the bears as they fished, their powerful forms in constant motion. To him, capturing nature in its raw, untamed beauty was everything. After a bitter divorce had left him destitute, Mikhail had poured himself into his work, transforming pain into a relentless pursuit of perfection, a way to push boundaries and escape his past. He was a man changed, unmoored, unafraid, and drawn to risks most would avoid. He'd built his reputation on close-up shots of dangerous predators for years. But Mikhail was a different man now. Where he once had been cautious, he was now reckless, with little regard for his safety. He pushed limits, moving into spaces others wouldn't dare enter. His assistant, a cautious young man named Ivan, watched with admiration and dread as Mikhail crept closer to the family of bears, his camera flashing as he snapped shot after shot, inching just a bit closer with each one. The male bear, a towering beast with a scarred muzzle, lifted his head, his wet fur gleaming in the morning light. Mikhail's lens focused on the bear's intense, dark eyes, the water beads glistening on its fur. Mikhail was fearless. After his divorce, he felt like he had nothing more to lose. The only thing that brought him solace was his art, and to be fair, the recognition it brought him. That's why he had to be the best, the one who would always push the limits to get the perfect shot. But the bear wasn't impressed by Mikhail's reputation or courage. No, the bear knew only a few things. One of them was that it did not, under any circumstances, like to have its territory invaded by nosy people. Suddenly, the animal's posture shifted. The air grew heavy as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Mikhail's years of experience should have warned him, but he didn't heed the instinct to retreat. The bear's stance went from relaxed to tense in a heartbeat, and then, with a low, rumbling growl, the animal charged. As it turned out, Mikhail's survival instinct was still present, no matter how jaded and numb the man felt. His camera dropped against his chest as he took a step back. Years of practiced calm kept him steady, but this was unlike any encounter he'd had before. The bear was moving fast, a blur of muscle and fur barreling toward him, and there was no shelter nearby, no escape route. He heard the sharp intake of Ivan's breath behind him and felt the weight of his assistant's horror. But he was alone now, face to face with the beast. The bear reached him with a final burst of speed, swiping a massive paw through the air. Mikhail tried to dodge, but the bear's claws caught his side, tearing into flesh. The pain was instantaneous, searing. Adrenaline surged, keeping him moving, his eyes darting to the camera dangling from his neck. Even now, some part of him couldn't let go of the shot, of the drive that had brought him so close to this creature. He scrambled to his feet, trying to back away, but the bear was relentless, closing in on him with another powerful swipe. Its claws raked across his chest this time, and he felt his vision swimming. The bear's massive head loomed above him, its hot breath stirring the air as it snarled, saliva dripping from its jaws. Every instinct in Mikhail screamed to fight, to survive, but his body betrayed him, heavy with pain and exhaustion. From the corner of his eye, he saw his assistant frozen in terror a few yards away. Ivan's face was pale, eyes wide, but Mikhail knew he was too far to help. The bear loomed closer, its scent a pungent mix of earth and blood, and Mikhail felt an unexpected sense of calm, almost a resignation. This was what he'd sought, wasn't it? To be as close to the wild as he could, to capture its power and danger. He had flirted with it, taunted it, but now he was truly in its grasp. Mikhail's last thought was oddly clear, a single image of the shot he'd captured moments before, the wild eyes of the bear meeting his through the lens, a moment frozen forever. His hand, still gripping the camera, went slack as the bear's weight pressed down, ending the struggle. When the bear finally lumbered back toward the river, satiated and unthreatened, the silence settled over the forest like a shroud. Ivan rushed forward, his shaking hands reaching for his friend and mentor. But it was too late. Mikhail lay still, his body marked by the bear's brutal strength, the camera clutched loosely in his hand. The world would remember Mikhail Pavlov for his photography and the price he paid to get that perfect shot. His final images, salvaged from the camera's memory card, showed a sequence that would haunt viewers worldwide. Frame by frame, they captured the very essence of Mikhail's art, a commitment so consuming that it disregarded fear and saw beauty in the sharp edge between life and death. As news of his death spread, the conversation shifted to the ethical boundaries of wildlife photography and the risks taken in the name of art. But for those who knew Mikhail, it was simply who he was, a man who had been transformed by loss, drawn to danger, and ultimately claimed by the very wild he had sought to immortalize. Early morning on September 6, 2020, Anna Petrovna adjusted her backpack, her fingers tightening around the straps as she took in the dense, mist-laden forest surrounding her. She had always been drawn to solitude and the thrill of exploring nature's raw, untouched landscapes. At 28, Anna prided herself on her solo adventures, each one a badge of her fearlessness, a personal testament against the mundane. Her social media was filled with pictures of her standing on cliff edges, venturing into caves and crossing rivers, each image a claim to her wild spirit. Anna was far from an influencer, but liked sharing her adventures with friends and family online. She knew this trail, a challenging route up a well-known Russian mountain, would add another gem to her growing adrenaline-fueled achievements. Despite numerous warnings online and signs at the trailhead cautioning against recent bear sightings, Anna had set off at dawn, confident she could handle any situation. She had done this before. She had even survived a bear encounter unscathed before. Besides, the dawn light was perfect for photography, and she wanted to capture the mountains in the first blush of morning. The path wound upward, thick with overgrowth, and marked only by faint signs from previous hikers. Hours passed as Anna lost herself in the rhythm of the hike, her breathing steady, her feet light on the uneven ground. She occasionally glanced at her phone to document the surroundings, already picturing the likes and comments her photos would draw. Halfway through the trail, the forest grew denser, shadows deepening as trees leaned close overhead, blotting out the sunlight. Here, Anna paused, drawn by a faint rustle just off the path. She squinted, and a few yards away stood a bear cub, its small, dark eyes curious as it pawed at the undergrowth. The sight filled her with excitement and an urge to capture the moment. Ignoring the nagging reminder of recent warnings, she raised her phone, carefully framing the cub. Suddenly, from behind her, there was a sound, a low, rolling growl that vibrated through the air. The realization hit too late. Anna's heart hammered as she turned, her breath catching as a massive shape barreled through the trees toward her. It was the mother bear, her fur bristling, her eyes fixed on Anna with a fierce, protective intensity. The bear's approach was swift, far quicker than Anna could react. Panic surged through her, and a tiny voice in her mind told Anna it was it. This was her end. The realization didn't quite settle when the bear knocked Anna to the ground. Her backpack was ripped open, scattering belongings around her, but she barely registered it over the blinding panic that filled her mind and blinded her senses. She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled, her strength already failing as adrenaline surged, heightening her senses and slowing her movements. Anna caught a brief glimpse of the bear's towering form, its teeth bared, its powerful muscles rippling under thick fur. In her panicked mind, she realized there was no escape, no way out of the creature's territory. She felt a profound terror, a knowledge that her presence had crossed an unspoken boundary, one that nature had been quick to enforce. As the bear lunged again, Anna twisted instinctively, trying to shield herself, her arms coming up in a vain attempt at protection. The impact was crushing, pinning her to the ground as the bear's jaws closed around her forearm, the pressure intense and unyielding. The pain was indescribable. She tried to kick, to free herself, but each movement seemed only to intensify the bear's aggression. Her vision blurred, sweat and tears mingling as she gasped, her mind racing through a chaotic swirl of memories, regrets, and a bitter realization of the danger she had dismissed so lightly. Her independence, pride, and thrill-seeking seemed hollow now, meaningless in the face of nature's raw power. The bear released her arm, only to swipe at her again, its claws raking across her torso. Anna's breath came in short, gasping bursts as her vision narrowed. She could feel her body weakening, the pain overwhelming, draining her of whatever strength she had left. Her surroundings seemed to blur, the vibrant greens of the forest and the earthy scent of pine fading as a deep cold settled over her. The bear kept shaking Anna's body even after she was gone. The animal's wrath was unimaginable. Finally, the animal calmed down. It retreated into the undergrowth with its cub close behind. Silence filled the air again, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves. Hours later, a search party would find her belongings scattered across the ground, a chilling testament to her last moments. Her phone, miraculously unscathed, held a final image, the curious bear cub, frozen in time before chaos erupted. News of her tragic fate spread quickly, capturing national attention and sparking a wave of public concern. In the wake of Anna's death, new conservation initiatives emerged with a strong focus on educating the public about wilderness safety. Park rangers began offering mandatory orientation sessions at trailheads, where hikers were briefed on recent animal activity, safety protocols, and the critical importance of keeping distance from wildlife. These sessions included vivid, real-life stories of past encounters to show visitors the dangers of ignoring posted warnings. Authorities also installed larger, clearer signage along trails, featuring images of bear behaviors and detailed instructions on avoiding aggressive encounters. Conservation groups launched outreach programs in nearby communities, bringing trained rangers and wildlife experts to schools and community centers. Through interactive workshops, locals learned how to store food properly, recognize animal tracks, and respond to sudden wildlife encounters. Anna's tragic end became a rallying call for increased awareness, forever changing how people approached and respected the wilderness.